want to wait less, but
I want to wait
Is
more.
that-
Okay. And there is, we could do an activity, also the similar activity with thinner, but I kind of wanted to do it with the overweight. So I think we're waiting on Jennifer and Marcia. So I'll ask again, but I'd like to do that activity and just kind of see how it works out. Because I want to give you some things. This is our last week of health, or is next week the fourth week? I don't know why I'm having.
This is the third.
This is week 3, okay. So we're still in health psychology. So I want to do some mudras. I want to do some emotions with traditional Chinese medicine. I have all these handouts. You'll get them in a few minutes. I want to go through some planets. So this is all to sort of continue from the chakras. Other ways to identify issues or to give clients homework. And what else did I say? Oh, and then like the hands as elements and emotions. I'm just writing it so I don't forget because I'm a little scattered today. So I want to go through that stuff. I want to do the activity with the overweight. So if you do have somebody who has weight issues or who has suddenly gained weight, especially in particular parts, sort of questions that you can ask the client about the weight issue, what psychologically it's doing there. So we'll talk about that. I'm going to ask you a few questions so you guys can do a little activity. And then I want to do an activity with this. Has anyone ever seen this? Does anyone have a clue? Have you seen this? No one ever seen this? Perfect. I love when no one knows. There's usually one person in the class that knows what it is, and I keep them for last. So we'll do an activity with that. It's kind of cool. Okay, so we're going to continue with health. Last class we were doing all of the chakras. Okay? Any questions on what we did with the chakras, the colors, or is everybody understanding how the body is set up and where it carries messages? Any questions on how emotion and trauma gets stuck in the body and gets clustered into certain parts, and the messages that they're sending through the mind or through the physical? Is everybody understanding that the emotions and the traumas that we have stay in our cellular memory, and that's what creates illness later on? Okay, so I want to make sure you understood why I drew. It's my short version today. When I draw the caduceus and I explain that first you have an emotional trauma. Someone shares something very tragic or traumatic in their life.
You said you wanted to share something?
Yeah.
When I had my heart attack.
Okay, you had your heart attack. What happened? What happened? What caused it? What were the situations? Were you alone? I put heartache because that's my trauma. I just got divorced yesterday. Oh, the subconscious is just a very interesting place.
I was separated from my.
How long prior to the heart attack had you been separated?
4 weeks.
Okay. 4 weeks. Separation. heart attack. What's the fourth chakra?
Love healing.
The heart. Her heart was broken. I wasn't wrong when I put heartache. Okay? That trauma, and what happened? Did he leave? Was it sudden?
Yeah, he said that he was gonna go to Philadelphia and see his mom, and he never came back.
Okay. That's traumatic. So, what happens to us when I talk about our subconscious forming, we have conception, there's trauma. What else do we have? Pregnancy. Morning. There's trauma. What else do we have? Birthing process. There's trauma. And then we have our story. And I say 0 to 7, even though you were how old?
When it happened, I was
Conception.
something.
Okay, so 30-something doesn't fall into 0 to 7. But we know that if we take her story and we backtrack, there is a story in 0 to 7. And we know that your mother left to go work and you were left alone. So she already has the pattern in her subconscious. So the husband picking up and leaving to visit his mom is all related. So again, the story the client shares, there's going to be a link in the story from 0 to 7. But this is all trauma, trauma, trauma. What happens during pregnancy, during conception? Anyone know their conception story? Where your parents were, in the back of the car, drunk,
No.
happy? You do? Tell us.
When my mother, and I'm the firstborn, this was in Argentina, and her water broke, I guess. She was about to give birth to me, and they had to call a taxi, because they didn't have a car. So we had to call a taxi, and on the way to the hospital, the taxi gets a flat. And the guy was so nervous that my father had to change the tire to get to the hospital on time. And I wasn't born in the taxi, but I remember telling that story that the guy was so nervous he couldn't even change the tire. So my father had to go out, change the tire, and then we got to the hospital on time.
Okay, so this is part of the pregnancy birth story. But what about conception? What do you know about?
Yes, I do know a little about conception, because
Okay.
this is a story.
Hold on.
Yeah.
Just waiting for the results from the hospital. That's not, okay.
So the conception is, what I've always been told is that, my parents got married, it was September also, September 10th, and then I was born a year later, September 11th. But my mother wanted to get pregnant right away, and they were only married for like 3 months, and nothing was happening. And she was like, she tells the story that one day he was like crying, and it's like, nothing's happening, can't get pregnant. And then my father was like, all right, this is it, we're gonna do this. And it's like, gave her a glass of wine or something. My mother doesn't drink. And that's how I was conceived. It was like, my father was like, okay, we're gonna do this. This is gonna happen.
Very Virgo style.
And he's a
Organized and planned.
but he's a Libra.
Doesn't matter, you're a Virgo.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Planned, right.
Very planned. Okay, so there was some trauma because the mom wanted something and wasn't getting it. Okay, so that has to be somewhere in Adriana's story. That's not a major trauma. This is a funny kind of trauma. But there's trauma all along. And so as the baby is forming, and through to 7, all of those traumas, whether it's that student that I told you about, that the teacher insulted her because she didn't tie her shoes or know her address, that's a trauma, that goes to a cell. Whether it's, oh my God, there's a flat tire, I'm not going to be at the right place at the right time, that's a trauma. Whether it is your husband leaves and never comes back, that's a trauma. We start collecting these knots of emotions that are like trapped in our cells. So now you go into Victoria's Secret and it is, you're buying some sexy lingerie for your honeymoon, and you go to pay and you get into a fight with the girl. And you don't know what the hell, but you're fighting with her, you're telling her off. And this thing is just in your face, and you're like, what the fuck? Why am I fighting with this woman? Or what? The woman's like, why are you fighting with me? Because you have a trauma that maybe your husband called you fat, or your mother told you that you were overweight, or you have never worn lingerie before because you were supposed to be, you know, a virginal, prim and proper. And you're having a regular, run-of-the-mill experience at the mall, and you lose your shit. Why? Your husband's not leaving you that day. You're not stuck in a flat tire that day. You're not at court having a really hard day. You're at the mall shopping. Why, in that exchange, in that store, or at a restaurant, or with a friend, do you lose your shit over something so tiny?
Because it's something that reminded you of it.
Yes. It reignited the trauma, the trauma, the trauma, the trauma. So all the shit that goes on during your day, all it's doing is like reopening the wound and going zzz. So you're fighting with the girl at the Victoria's Secrets, but really, it's your husband who left, who never came back, his fucking bitch of a mother, the woman that of course eventually he's shacked up with, and the poor freaking angel at Victoria's Secrets, I use that on purpose because they're called the Victoria's Secret Angels, is like, damn. And we do this and these exchanges all day with people, and that's why nothing is personal. Because what people are reacting to is unresolved trauma. Emotions that are stuck. The trauma, and they're stuck somewhere along the chakra system. Somewhere in an organ. That's why the physical manifestation that shows up, if you don't work through your emotional trauma, eventually impacts part of your physical life. We need to process our emotions. We need to be honest. So I told you guys the other day, I am in a total victim, I don't give a shit, hopeless surrender mode, right? So yesterday a friend of mine calls me, and he's like, oh, he's just like one of these guys. It's like, I tell it like it is, man. So I said, oh, you love telling it like it is. You want to hear it? And I went, like 20 minutes. I laid it on the line. Everything I felt about myself. I mean, he was silent. He was like, oh shit. I said, can you deal with that? Can you deal with that level of truth? I said, if not, I may not be able to be with you and spend time with you. Because what I need right now is people who can handle the level of emotional trauma that I'm getting out of my body that scares the shit out of people. Because we don't like to get so dirty and honest about our trauma that we keep pretending and pretending and pretending. And a lot of us suffer in silence. There's this course of study called BioDecoding. And one of the things that the developer of that course of study said is that these traumas are suffered alone in silence. When I lost custody, I felt alone. I don't feel alone with this cancer. I felt alone with my first cancer. I felt I suffered this divorce alone in silence, my first one. So those are all the traumas that are coming up to heal. So I have to get as dirty and as raw and as honest with my trauma and my emotions as possible. That's why you cannot suppress the client and say, oh, no. And when I was talking to him, he goes, damn. He goes, I have never heard someone so hopeless. I have to reach that level of worthlessness and hopelessness to release that trauma from my cells. And if you're not willing to get down and dirty like that, you're going to keep having the fights with the Victoria's Secret angel. You're going to keep fighting with your husband about the same stupid fight. You're going to still have the same behaviors and gain weight or argue with the gardener. Because you're just reliving the trauma over and over and over again. And I'm tired. I figure I die, or I clean the shit out of the traumas, that the fence and the knots get so smooth that I'm like a baby just starting over. Those are my only two options. And sometimes we don't have safe spaces to speak about the truth of the traumas, because what happened? Oh, you can't say that. That's a family secret. Oh, you were abused by your, oh no, shh. And all the piece of shit secrets that we have to keep for social graces to be maintained so that everybody else in your fucking life feels good. And you swallow, and you swallow, and you swallow. And that knot that you swallow goes to the organs. And unless you're willing to start getting it out, you're going to stay sick. Maybe you'll never get the physical cancer, but you will stay sick. So, first and foremost, in a therapeutic setting, is you create a safe space and empathy and allow the client to feel what they want to feel. And if it makes you uncomfortable, you look at your own shit, but you do not get them to say what they don't want to say so that you can feel comfortable. And this guy called me this morning, and he's like, man, you killed me last night, Francis, you killed me last night. Because every day, if I show you my text, you've been my light, you've been my guide, you've been my mentor, you held me through the darkest times, and of course, my people want to do this for me. The best way right now to do that for me is to let me tell you how worthless piece of shit I feel, that I want to die, and let me just be there so I can resolve this. But if that makes you uncomfortable, you hurt me because you're making me swallow a secret and all the shit that happened in childhood that we all have, and then we all were back here. And therapists do that to clients all the fucking time because they haven't looked at their shit. And it makes them uncomfortable. So he calls me this morning and he's like, it's your process and I'm going to support you. Whatever you want. I'm not going to say anything. I'm like, thank you. So you understand your role, possibly as a friend, but definitely as a therapist. That is part of your role, is to understand that this shit that is stuck in this energetic system that is hidden underneath this skin and is stuck here needs to come out. That's why I use this thing of, oh my God, that person's so constipated. Because once you start getting it out, there's so many times that I have clients and I'll do a visualization with them and I'll say, they close their eyes and I guide them to a place. And I remember this one woman, she was I think in Amsterdam or somewhere in Europe. And I'm like, okay, go to the moment you remember or whatever age. And she shows up, she sees herself on her bed and she's a little girl and she's just waiting. She's just waiting. She's just sitting there waiting. And I asked her, I said, ask your little girl, what is she waiting for? She's waiting like for some excitement. She's waiting for someone to come. And she had I think she had like a 4th stage cancer. I think this person was like close to having like possibly, a death sentence. And her whole life was about the waiting and the waiting. And now she was like waiting to die. And she had waited for someone to save her. She had waited for her father to come, I guess, to pick her up, And when you connect back to those traumas, you really understand. And so what I had her do was tell her that she's such a piece of shit because she's wasted her life. She's this, she that, whatever I came up with. And she starts saying it, she says it, she starts crying, of course. And I'll do this with clients, and I had this one client who says, I can't say it. And I'm like, oh, you're going to say it. Because when we can get down and just say what we're thinking anyway, what our life is demonstrating anyway, if you feel fucking unlovable, like that book that I brought you the other day, what? Don't open a freaking animal shelter if you hate fucking animals. How healing it'll be to go take an animal and kill it. I'm not proposing that. I'm just saying, okay, give me a second. Sorry. I'm just saying that when you know it, because you know what you feel about yourself anyway. You know what your trauma taught you. You're worthless, you're unlovable, you're a slut, you're a loser. My father doesn't love me because he never picked me up. It is in the privacy of your own home. Buy yourself a doll and tell her or him. And get it out. That starts to release those nadis, to breathe. So anyone who wants to hear it is going to hear what a piece of shit I feel like. A worthless piece of shit, an unlovable piece of shit. Because that's my healing right now. I am getting to this. And once I'm done saying it, then I can start new. But how many people is it uncomfortable for to hear when their friend or their mentor or their teacher or their lover is saying these things? No. When that client tells you, or this teacher or a friend, after they finish and you listen to them, go to your journal and say, damn, that was uncomfortable. Because it's time for you to get real with yourself. That's such a destructive thing in therapeutic relationships. That's why I was talking to you about the Ishvadevatar in the form of God. If the form of God is a sack of pebbles, do not try to change your client's opinion because it makes you uncomfortable because you're a devout freaking Christian. If you can't handle it, look at your shit and then refer that client. But people need to resolve these traumas. It's like a chain link fence. Our entire body is knotted with all of the traumas that we've had even before we were born. And we keep getting more like this. So this system has no flesh, but it's where it stores all your emotional trauma, from the stress that her father had and the taxi driver and her mother, from the fact that they drank wine and said, yesterday we went out to lunch and it was like a sip of wine, and now she says this story. There's a sip of wine,
Oh, that's funny.
and neither one of us drink.
I know.
But it was a hard fucking day, and a girlfriend of ours was like, come on, let's get you out of your funk. And we shared a drink that we took one sip of,
We left most of it on the table.
and then she went and took the sip of wine, and here is the sip of wine of conception. It's like, oh, it's not, oh, we're gonna have wine, have a baby. It's just all connected, so those things are stored. That's why I talk to you about the energy system, because emotions and mental trauma and all of that, you don't see it, but you see it when you go to Victoria's Secret and say, this fucking sucks, and I want my refund, and what the fuck is going on here? That's your chakra system going, whoa. And then we take it personal, but now you're not going to take it personal. Now you're going to go, what chakra are they speaking from? And you're going to see that they have a trauma. And how healthy, not healthy, to go to every store and yell at the clerk. That is not what I am proposing. But that the person has a release, if they had a therapeutic relationship that was healthy, you could take that story, oh my God, I went to Victoria's Secrets today and I yelled at the bitch, and you start, and just before we go down to coffee with the president, what chakra would Victoria's Secrets, buying lingerie, what chakra trauma are we talking about?
She has no secret.
So, throwing it out there. Which chakra would you think?
Second and third.
The second. The second. Okay. So we're going to take a break. We're going to go down to coffee with the president.